Situationship, the relationship trap nobody talks about. Biblical wisdom for love, dating, and marriage. This is Love Factual. So, have you ever been in a relationship where you weren't really in a relationship? You spent time together, you talked every day, you text consistently, you acted like a couple. Other people thought you were a couple. But every time the conversation turned towards commitment, things got uncomfortable. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you're there right now. And if you are, I want to have an honest conversation with you. Because I think situationships have become one of the biggest relationship problems of our generation. Now, before we go any further, let's define what a situationship is. A situationship is a relationship without clear commitment. It's more than friendship, but less than a committed relationship. You're emotionally involved, sometimes physically involved. You spend time together, you invest your feelings. But there is no real commitment, no clear direction, no agreed upon future. You're together, but not together. One of those kind of situations. And that's where the trouble begins. The first question we need to ask is this: why do people stay in situationships? Because if situationships are so painful, why don't people simply leave? But I think that the answer is simpler than most people realize. Much simpler than you realize. Because people stay because situationships provide some of the benefits of a relationship without requiring the responsibilities of one. I want you to think about it. So you get companionship, you get attention, you get emotional support, you get someone to talk to, you get someone to spend time with. You see where I'm going? But you don't have to fully commit. You don't have to make promises. You don't have to define the future. And for some people, that feels safe. The problem is that what feels safe today can often create pain tomorrow. And it does. In many situations, that's what happens. Because one person usually becomes more emotionally invested than the other. You never intended for it to be that way. But then, like they say, you start catching feelings. One person starts to imagine the future. The other person stays comfortable in the present. And eventually someone gets hurt. So let's talk about something: fear. Because I think fear is a driving force behind much of this. Fear. Let me tell you why. Because some people are afraid of commitment. Not because they're bad people, not because they're evil. They're just afraid. Maybe they've been hurt before. Maybe they watched a painful divorce. Maybe they've been betrayed. Maybe they don't trust themselves. Maybe they don't trust anyone else. So instead of fully committing, they stay in the gray area. They're not in, but they're not out. And they're definitely not committed. But however, they're not completely detached. You see what I'm saying? Just enough involvement to enjoy the benefits, but not enough commitment to feel vulnerable. And here's the problem. You cannot build a healthy relationship on fear. At some point, every meaningful relationship requires risk. You have to trust. You have to be vulnerable. You have to step forward. Without that, relationships never reach their full potential. So now let me say something that might be difficult for some people to hear. But I want you to listen. Hear me out on this. Sometimes a situationship continues because one person is hoping the other person will eventually change. Indeed. So have you ever heard someone say, well, we've been talking for 3 years. We've been seeing each other for 4 years. We act like we're together, but we're not officially together. At some point, we have to stop asking what people say and start paying attention to what people do. What they do is more important than what they say. Because there's a saying, action speaks louder than words. Because actions communicate priorities. If they consistently avoid commitment, that tells you something. If someone keeps moving the goalpost, it's here today, but it's there tomorrow, that tells you something. If every conversation about the future makes them uncomfortable, that tells you something. Now, listen, I'm not saying that people can't change. People change every day. They can. I've seen God do it over and over again. But you should not build your future around the possibility that someone might become a different person tomorrow. You have to evaluate the relationship based on what exists today, not what you hope it becomes tomorrow. So now let's bring God into the conversation, because I believe situationships create confusion. And God is not the author of confusion. Healthy relationships thrive on clarity. They thrive on honesty. They thrive on intentionality. Because the Bible teaches us, let your yes be yes and your no be no. In other words, be clear, be truthful, be straightforward. One of the reasons why situationships become so painful is because clarity is often missing. You're not sure what's happening. Nobody wants to define anything. Nobody wants to ask difficult questions. Nobody wants to risk hearing an answer they don't like. So people remain stuck month after month, year after year. You're waiting for uncertainty because that's what it is. Certainty is not coming. And then you're avoiding the very conversation that would provide it. Certainty. The very conversation that will provide that certainty, you refuse to have that conversation. So now let me speak directly to the person who feels trapped in a situationship. Listen, you deserve clarity. Let me say it again. You deserve clarity. You need to know where your life is going, what the future holds, or what it might look like. You deserve to know where you stand. You deserve honesty. You deserve respect. You deserve someone who is willing to communicate openly about the future. Look, I'm not saying that every relationship must lead to marriage. Not every relationship should. Let's get that straight. But every healthy relationship should have honesty. Nobody should spend years wondering whether they matter. Nobody should spend years guessing what the relationship means or doesn't mean. Nobody should spend years waiting for someone to decide whether they are worthy of commitment. Now, look, before someone misunderstands me, commitment doesn't guarantee success. People can't commit and still face challenges. People can't commit and still make mistakes. But commitment creates foundation. It provides direction. It gives both people something to build upon. A situationship often provides feelings without foundation. And feelings alone are not enough because feelings change. Emotions fluctuate. Life happens. So the question is not simply about how you feel today. The question is whether you're building something that can last tomorrow. So if you're currently in a situationship, here are 3 questions you need to ask yourself. Number 1, where is this relationship going? Not where do you hope it's going? Where is it actually going? That's the first question. And the second question is, have we had that honest conversation about commitment? Have you? Ask yourself that. We're not talking about hints. We're not talking about assumptions. We're not talking about wishful thinking. An honest conversation. Be truthful. Be open. Be honest. And number 3, if nothing changes over the next 2 years, would I still be satisfied with this relationship? You've got to point to yourself and ask that question. I know that's a difficult question, but it's an important one. Because listen, many people stay based on future expectations rather than present realities. You're looking down the road. Maybe this will happen, so I'm going to stay. Let's see what happens. 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years in a situationship. But anyway, let me close with this. I don't believe that most situationships begin with bad intentions. I think many begin with 2 people who enjoy each other's company. 2 people who genuinely care about each other. 2 people who aren't sure what they want. It happens. But eventually, uncertainty becomes a decision. Eventually, avoiding commitment becomes a choice. Eventually, someone has to decide whether the relationship is moving forward or standing still. Because life is too precious. Life is definitely too short to spend years living in emotional limbo. Healthy relationships require courage. The courage to be honest. The courage to communicate. The courage to commit. And listen, sometimes the courage to walk away. This is important. You need to have the courage to walk away. So let me ask you, have you ever been in a situationship? What happened? Did it eventually become a committed relationship, or did it end in heartbreak? I would love to know. So do me a favor and leave your thoughts in the comment section below, because I think this is a conversation that a lot of people need to have. So if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need to hear it. All right, God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.